Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Congregation Ne'er Tamid in San Francisco. It's my hope that you have enjoyed this wonderful series about 100 years of music through Israel's history. And I thank Noah Levy very much for presenting this. Near to Mid offers services every Friday night at 6, Shabbat morning at 9:30 on YouTube. We have Torah study on Zoom. We're having an interesting program January 18th on racial justice, a Tu B'Shvat Seder on January 27th, and we hope that you will check out our website, neartomidsf.org, and see what activities and programs we offer. If anyone would like to be included on our mailing list, please let us know. We would be so pleased to have you come and we could meet you and you could see what we offer. At the end of Noah's presentation, please remain with us as our Rabbi Shana Chandler Leon will be offering a special blessing. And after she is finished, Noah is going to remain on and answer your questions and your chats. So, without any further ado, I turn the evening over to Noah.
Thank you, Charlotte. Lovely introduction, and I will get right to it. We have a lot to cover today, just about 4 decades of music. So I will do my best, and bear with me when I speed through time. We will start where we left off last session. Was the beginning of what we call in the research about Israeli culture was a break. There was a break that happened in the culture and in this transition from the years of building and the Zionist dream into a formation of Israeli culture that is not as nationalistic as it was before. So what we have looked at is the first thing that basically facilitated this break was the hardest war that we've experienced to date. Not that the previous ones were easy, but this one definitely was quite a lot more traumatic. The 73 war, the Yom Kippur, and we've heard this song by the band called Ktsat Acheret. And not that there hasn't been songs of memory before, but this one I highlighted its kind of melange of universal culture by using this very familiar book called The Little Prince and given it an Israeli experience. So there is this combination now that this is not just about Israel, but this is about slightly more personal experience of Israelis. We've seen Lu Yehi, and now we will go ahead and look at some other developments that happened. The first one was the infiltration, I would say, of rock music into the Israeli culture. So this is a generation that was born in Israel, generally speaking. And just like all other youth around the world, heard the sounds of the Beatles and was highly influenced. And these musicians that basically grew up and then maybe signed on to the Navy or Army bands, met in the Army bands, but all had to kind of sing Army songs in their Army job, but at the downtime they would hang around and play Beatles songs and Led Zeppelin and other bands. And they started to write songs in that style in Hebrew, talking about the Israeli experience and using a lot of humor, since, as I said, the 73 war was extremely traumatic. And some of the ways of escapism from that trauma was using a lot of humor and laughing. So this band, Kaveret, another translated as beehive, probably the most successful Israeli band to date. Kaveret, it was basically a group of 7 to 8 members that were a mixture of people who were new olim chadashim, that we talked about from the era of the Ma'abarot, from the 50s, and people who were tzabarim, born and raised in Israel. They all met around the army bands, and predominantly the Lehakat HaNachal. And then once they finished their service, they created a band that basically rose to meteoric success. The famous song by Kaveret is Yoya, but I would like to play you some other songs. This is a beautiful little number that was written, that it's called A Small Country, and you will see the use of humor in the lyrics, and also try to hear the combination of using modern electric guitars and look at all these ginormous amplifiers, but still having a little bit of that maybe Middle Eastern sound. Let's hear.
אספנו את עצמנו, הבאנו חברנו, ולא אמרנו מאומה. בדרום, בצפון, או במרכז, שכרנו קצת שמיים, דמעות הביאו מים, פתחנו ארץ חדשה. מדינה קטנה, מתחמקת מצרה, את הכתובת לא תמצא, היא שמורה בתוך קופסה, בעולם כל כך קשה, להתבלט זה לא יפה, נתחבק כאן ולנצח לא נצא. שני בתים.
I will stop here. What you can see, this is very humoristic, trying to talk about this grandiose vision of the pioneer era that's been kind of reduced into something that we just want to stay out of trouble. This is a little story and kind of making fun out of the ideal. And we hear in the sound of the guitar that this is not the rock and roll sound, but still they're again using all of the instrumentations, and even in their kind of oompa 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 oompa, this is a little bit of a remnants to the songs of the kibbutz, or the songs of the Hityashvut, the early days. Let's hear a different example where we hear a little bit more of that rock sound. This is one of their most successful songs. And you will see how really ridiculous the lyrics are. So this is not the era of Bialik and the beautiful poets. This is Hebrew used very, very simply and jokingly. So we don't need any big statements in our songs anymore. The Baruch's boots. Hold on. It's starting with a skit in the tradition of it's starting with a skit in the tradition of the army bands and the Gashash HaChiver that we saw. So as you see, oops, I lost myself. The humor again is playing a part. It's this, even though it was a musical group, they had skits still in their shows. Here we go.
שתק, הוא לקח אותם לסרט כל יומיים, אבל יום אחד הוא נקרא, עדיין מנונה, חיפש למקפיים בארון.
Highly beloved group.
שהם היו, רק 40 נשארו, שסיפרו לו את הכל בהיגיון. שנעליים קונים מהר וגרביים לא חסר רק מגפיים מכנסיים שתמיד קונים קומפלט קשה מאוד להשיג אותם כעת נגדי נגדי
Yep, that guitar song is very famous. Today we sing it along. Everybody, when this band used to perform and they reunited twice in the 90s and the 2000s, everybody chants along to that pretty oriental, I would say, guitar sound. Also, you saw that they were dancing. So I didn't think the Beatles or any other rock band were doing either skits or dances in their concerts. This is something kind of interesting, how the effect of the army band infiltrated the music, and humor and dance was kind of expected in those big shows. But rock advanced, and we're departing from there, and we'll see. First of all, I will play a glimpse of a very successful rock band in the style of progressive rock called Tammuz, one of the Hebrew months. And this song, Sof Onat Tapuzim, was one of the most successful Arab songs in the decade. You will hear a little bit of that. Okay, so the lyrics to this song were written by Meir Ariel, a very later day famous poet, publicist, who wrote a lot of lyrics, but also a lot of political protests. This song, in the Hebrew lyrics, they kind of are reminiscent of a kibbutz lifestyle. In this, and tapuzim, what could be more the orange? What could be more symbolic? So there is something a little bit symbolic about the name of the song, the end of the season of oranges, when we're talking about that break. We hear definitely a rock sound that we have not quite heard before. The person singing the song, the lead vocalist of this band, is Shalom Chanoch. Shalom Chanoch, quite a few years earlier, was singing very folksy, pleasant, kind of Eretz Israeli style of singing. So he was the one who basically said, "I'm tired of this. I want to modernize the sound." And we will hear even a stronger example of that shift in a very famous song in a record by Arik Einstein called Shablul. Shablul is a snail. And this is Arik Einstein right here on the left, and Shalom Chanoch next to him. You will see he looks suspiciously like Bob Dylan. And Arik Einstein, let's hear it a little bit, and then I will talk a little bit about the kind of what we hear behind the song. This song is called, whoops, not this. It's called Lama li lakachat lalev. Why should I take it to heart?
למה לי לקחת ללב? יש לי דברים חדשים בראש, יש לי דמיון שעוזר לפעמים לשכוח. למה לי לקחת ללב? יש לי הרבה לאהוב מראש, יש לי תמיד חברים שעוזרים לשמוח. תן לצחוק, תן ללמוד, תן לצחוק ותן לשמוע. תן לחיות ותן לטעות, תן לעצמך לסלוח, פשוט לאהוב.
Yep. So what we heard here, we have Arik Einstein coming in with this is the Arik Einstein that we know. He's singing very lyrical, sort of a ballad. Why should I take it to heart? I have so many things to worry about. Singing in a minor key, which is sort of the kind of classic sound. A lot of our songs, the Jewish songs, are written in a minor key. And in comes in Shalom Chanoch with a kicking energy, let me live, let me be happy, switching into a major key in kind of that rockabilly sound. So this song is basically the duality that we're feeling here. Enough of those sadness, enough of the melancholy. We want to have the energy of the 60s, that kind of vitality. So we will see more of that in that kind of connection, kind of being connected to the circumstances. So there is a lot to be sad and tragic events that are happening, but still wanting to be connected to what's going on in the world. And people are starting to lose faith with the establishment, with the army bands. Basically in the 70s, the army bands have started to decline and we're no longer ruling the top of the charts. Bands like Tammuz and Kaveret took over and represented more of what the public was wanting to hear. They didn't want to identify themselves with the IDF, with the war. They wanted something else. They experienced sort of more uncertainty, and the writers and musicians turned in and started writing about what was going on in their own personal life, and songs became more personal. I was speaking to Alan, who I think is present here, and he's a dance instructor, Israeli dance instructor, if I'm not mistaken. He had also pointed out to me that this same break was experienced in dance as well. So the hora, which is a togetherness dance, which we talked about how it symbolizes everybody, the fraternity and relying on each other. The other person has to go in the same way that you're going, otherwise it's going to end badly. We'll crash into each other. In the 70s, no more of that. People started dancing more on their own, and the disco and the clubs, that was more autonomous dancing. So let's see one of the songs that I think, symbolizes the most what's going on in this break that I'm talking about. FYI, I have a lot of songs that I'm not going to be able to play. On the right-hand side, I'm just going to say this is Mati Kaspi and Shlomo Gronich, both very, very influential composers. And this song and all the rest are going to be on the playlist that will accompany the lecture. But now we're moving on to, yet again, Arik Einstein. I have said he's extremely fundamental. I can teach a whole class about how the history of Israel is showing up in his work. This song is called Could This Be All Over? Hayachol Liot Sheze Nigmar. I will play you a little bit and try to read the lyrics on the side to hear this break that I'm talking about.
שהיה פה שמח לפני שנולדתי, והכל היה פשוט נפלא עד שהגעתי. שומר עברי על סוס לבן בלילה שחור, בשפת הכנרת רומפלדור היה גיבור, תל אביב הקטנה, חולות אדומים, יין אחד. שני עצי שקמים, אנשים יפים, מלאים חלומות. אנו באנו ארצה לבנות ולהיבנות. כי לנו, לנו, לנו ארץ זאת. כאן איפה שאתה רואה את הדשא, היו פעם רק יבשים וביצות. אמרו שפעם היה כאן חלום נהדר, אבל כשבאתי לראות לא מצאתי שום דבר. יכול להיות שזה נגמר, יכול להיות שזה נגמר.
Yep, יכול להיות שזה נגמר. Could this all be over now? Lyrics very poignant. The lyrics were written by Yonatan Geffen. Yonatan Geffen, we will see a lot more of his work later. Extremely influential writer. Oops, lost it again. Publicist. He was a soldier who fought in the Yom Kippur War and experienced very severe trauma. He went back after a month of fighting, not only in Yom Kippur, but also in the War of Iteration. He started having a lot of nightmares. Basically, he said about himself that he was a shadow of a man. He had a son, he had a wife, and he severely used alcohol because nobody knew back in the days in Israel how to even deal with it. The term PTSD was not even used yet. So he channeled a lot of his work into a lot of his frustration and experience of stress and trauma into his writing. This is a great example of that. This is a generation that is saying, they say it was great before I was born, before I came here. So there's a kind of a distance now that people are experiencing. That era is over and it's not great anymore. Those dreams, those ideal, there's nothing. There's only I don't see this dream that you were talking about. When Arik Einstein is saying, Anu banu arza livnot ulehivanot ki lanu eretz zot. He's kind of waving his hand and kind of giving a little bit of a slightly mocking style to that expression of we came here to build and to be built, and this is our country. He's sort of trying to say, I don't know if this is me, if I can relate to that anymore. And Arik was, in his work, he also kind of went back and forth. He revolutionized the music by creating rock albums on one hand, and on the other hand, he still created more albums that they were called Songs of Good Old Israel. So these were songs of that era of the pioneers and the chalutzim. So it's as if he's saying, I am on this borderline between this ideal and what is actually going on in front of me. Let's move on and talk about, I will skip this one. I am sure most of you have heard this. Ani ve'ata neshaneh et ha'olam. This is a yearning for peace by Miki Gavrielov and Arik Einstein. And now let's talk about the other side of music. So we've heard rock and roll, and we've heard most of everybody that we've seen there on were Ashkenazi, if I would use that term, composers, performers, creators. Somebody asked me in the last lecture, I read the chat later and I saw that I missed a question, I think maybe by Moshe, and the question was, is it still relevant today, this gap between Ashkenazi and Mizrahi? Because I'd mentioned it so much in our previous lecture. And my answer is absolutely yes. It is perhaps not as violent and brutal as it was, like we saw with the riots in Haifa at the end of the 50s, and not in this era in the 70s we have the Black Panthers, and this is definitely a bitter feel of, I would say, point or side of the Israeli culture, that this gap that people experience between the Mizrahim and the Ashkenazim. Today, there's a lot of work being done to try and talk about this issue, and both literary, academically, culturally. There's TV shows. There's a lot of work trying to talk about this issue. Back in the day, in the 70s, and in fact until the late 80s, the Mizrahim were still feeling that like they were being marginalized, and they were fighting for recognition, fighting to be heard. So here we have a collection of examples of the kind of music that was not in the top of the charts, that didn't make it into the Festival of Songs, because as I said, after the first few years, there was a separation. There was a Festival of Song that was dedicated to the Mizrahi music, a festival, even another one dedicated to the Haredi, or the Orthodox music, and then a festival that was called Israeli music. That said, saying that basically the two other kinds were not Israeli, which of course today we're considering it was a very problematic decision. So let's hear first, we have Ahuva Ozeri, a little bit of that gorgeous woman. She Sorry about this, abrupt. I apologize. I don't have a fade button here. But Ahuva Ozeri, she actually, the instrument that she's playing is actually an Indian instrument. It's a tarang. And she learned it from an Indian Jew that made an aliyah a couple of decades ago. She was a Yemenite. You can hear a really interesting sound, musically speaking. There's a little organ, or organ is the word we use in Hebrew. This is basically a keyboard, it's a synthesizer. We have the tarang, and then we have that guitar that is kind of, I would say, sort of Arabic sounding. And she's opening this with a big opener that is called a taksim or a raga. And then she's switching into that beat, that groovy sound. The song is titled "Where Is My Soldier?" Eichana Chayal. So on top of it all, on top of this mix, she's singing about something completely Israeli. A soldier from the Yom Kippur War that went missing, and that she's his lover, and she is waiting and seeing where is he? I don't know. Another band that became very successful is the band called Tzlilei Ha'ud, and the person that we see here on the left is Yehuda Keisar. He invented this way of playing a guitar that had a very Oriental or Middle Eastern sound to it, that highly influenced the kind of, I don't know if you are in tune with modern Israeli music, but it's predominantly that it's a Mizrahi kind of style of pop music. So his way of playing in the 70s was the very highly influential. And then on the right-hand side, we have a kanun. These bands, again, they mostly did not make it to the radio, to the traditional, to the big channel, to the TV. They were mostly, these bands were highly popular, but they were sung outside of the sort of in the taverns, in the pubs, in the chafla, the kind of the Yemenite celebration. And that was the reason why there was so much anger that the Black Panthers were, the Israeli Black Panthers were talking about, and we will see it even later on in the 80s as well. But let's hear a little bit of Tzlilei Ha'ud, sounds of the oud.
אני מוגדל ירבע איש, אבל אני שמח. אין לי בית, יש לי כביש, מעל הכביש ירח. אולי אחד יש לו 100, ולשני 200, בלי פאה ועוד פאה, יחד באותיים.
Okay, so what we hear is this influence of Arisan and Greek music in this style of playing. We also hear the beat, the which is Mizrahi, slightly Moroccan, slightly Yemenite. And then the instrumentation, maybe not in this particular song, but this band Tzlilei Ha'ud also used a lot of the rock elements. And that was the founding kind of beginning of putting it all together. The Mizrahi musicians also heard the rock bands and were also influenced by that style and tried to put it into their music as well. There's a famous band called the Churchilim that we have here on the right, that they were doing completely a mix of rock and Mizrahi beat. And the cassette tape that we have here is a symbol. This music was called music of cassettes because of that reason, that these bands were not really heard on the main channels, and people were passing each other those tapes, pretty similar to what we see in America with rap, the beginnings of rap. So cassette music is the term that we use to talk about those early days of Mizrahi music. And there were, let's see what actually I'll skip this one, otherwise we'll run out of time. Moving on. Oh, why does it do that? Here we go. Just a little glimpse of this on the other side of the spectrum, as if we don't have enough diversity. A huge influence of Brazilian music was taken over the world, as with bossa that we see here in the States. Israelis didn't miss on that. Both by Brazilian volunteers that came to work in kibbutzim and played this music, and other Israelis that traveled to visit family, and so they brought back a lot of songs, and Israelis musicians fell in love. And here's a very famous album from the 70s called Eretz Tropit Yafa. This was a show on TV that was hugely popular, and this album till this day remains one of the most successful albums. And let's hear a little bit of that. This is Brazilian music in Hebrew.
כל שנה
All right, I'll have to leave the tropical country. Very fun. Here we have on the left, we have Mati Caspi. He was the originator of this project. And we have Yehudit Ravitz here as well. As I said before, Mati Caspi has huge influence on Israeli music, as well as Yehudit Ravitz. Another big thing that happened in the 70s was this album, till this day, again, considered a part of the Israeli music pantheon. This is a children's album. And I've said back in the early days that in Israel, children's music was highly valued as a means in the beginning of transmitting languages and ideas. We have a huge repertoire of children's songs back from the days of the early settlers and until today. The reason, the thing that helped to the fact that the music became so part of the culture is that musicians really valued the making children's music. It wasn't something that was looked down upon. It was the best of artists took part in this creation of writing for children. And in fact, it wasn't really for children. Adults enjoyed it as well. The Keves HaShishasha, the 16th Lamb, was a group of musicians that joined together to perform this work by Yehonatan Geffen. This was a book that he wrote of children's poems of the same name. Yehonatan Geffen is the same person that wrote Could This Be Over that we saw a few minutes ago. And in the last lecture where I played The Little Prince, he wrote the lyrics to that as well. And here we have something completely naive and yet absolutely Israeli. There's a talking about the mandatory, we talked about Israel having mandatory education. So the kindergarten, the Gan Chova, is what we called mandatory Gan or mandatory kindergarten. Here's a little glimpse of all of these are superstar. We have Yehudit Ravitz here on the left. We have Gidi Gov in the middle and David Broza, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. A little bit of, listen how all the audience is clapping along.
אחרי הצהריים הלכנו עם אמא למכולת ובדרך ראינו שהגן שלנו סגור. הנדנדות עומדות בין העצים הגבוהים והפרחים כאלה נמוכים ובלי צבעים כי הגן שלנו סגור.
Our kindergarten is closed.
להיות נרדמות מסודרות בסן ואין שם אף ילד שיבנה מהן מגדל. נרדמות מסודרות בסן ואין שם אף ילד שיבנה מהן מגדל.
Yes, I'll just stop here for a second. This is Yoni Rechter, a hugely influential composer, composed most of the songs in this album. We will move on from that. Again, I think this was chosen in a poll for the 70th anniversary of Israel. They were doing a poll of what are the most important albums of all time. I think this was number 3 or something like that, definitely in the top 10. So just so you know how important this is, something that sort of everyone could relate to. And we see this fraternity, this kind of air of singing together is very much present. There's a lot of harmony. There's a combination of singers and performers. This is a big group feeling. Move on from here. Whoops, sorry. And we have, I don't think I have time, probably the most beloved song, Israeli song of all time, again by Yoni Rechter. I will, it's definitely on the playlist. Listen to it later. It's a beautiful piece of work, both musically and with the lyrics by Avraham Khalfi, a poet. We will, however, move on from this. And here we have a very important event that happened right at the end of the 70s with Israel winning for the first time the Eurovision Song Contest. This is something I know that is slightly foreign to Americans because, but it was a huge deal for Israelis and Europeans alike. The fact that Israel was allowed to participate in the Eurovision Song Contest was a big political acknowledgement. And to win this in 1978 was absolutely, it was an amazing accomplishment. People went and danced in the street. It was huge. More than that, the person that won it was Yizahar Cohen. So we have a Yemenite. So this was a feeling of people of Mizrahim, that they could feel represented. Let's hear a little bit of that song. Unfortunately, the lyrics, I don't know, they're not the biggest pride and joy in my opinion, but I'll play it. And this is basically, Abani B is using the sort of like Pig Latin for Israelis, using the Sfat Habet. And it's sort of like a children's song. So it might be today, we might look at it and see that it's a little bit chauvinistic, but let's try to put ourselves in those shoes. I'll talk over it a little bit. We see them going in. We have a female composer. The composer is Nurit Hirsch. Very, very influential. She was the same one with Salah Shabati. And here they are going on stage. So much energy came from the song. Surprisingly, it didn't. Sorry. All right, right before the bridge. So a few words about this song. There's nothing in the music that is predominantly Israeli. In fact, Nurit Hirsch said that she was influenced by the Bee Gees, as we can sort of hear, and she wanted to bring that style of kind of more R&B to the Eurovision, because she thought back in those days, it wasn't very much done. It wasn't so much the style that people were arranging and composing for that show, for that contest. So it was a revolutionary move on her part to bring that energy of our sort of R&B groove and the Bee Gees disco style. Later on, we had ABBA basically adopted that concept. And the other thing that's interesting is that there was a dance break, and Yizar Cohen is a great dancer and a great singer, and he's really taken the stage by storm. This song originally in Israel, it didn't win first place in the Festival Hazemer. It was actually tied, so it could have not gone to the contest, but luckily it did. And Yizar Cohen said that the feeling of euphoria after they won, they felt that until that day, Hava Nagila was basically what people thought of when they thought about Jewish music, Jewish people's music. And then at that time, after the winning this contest, the song became a club hit in all over Europe. And they felt like they are bringing the representation of the Israeli, no longer the Jewish Hava Nagila Jew, but the Israeli feel of vibrant and disco dancing. And it was a huge pride that he said, we have turned in the eyes of the world from Jewish nation to Israelis. So moving on from here, I will have to skip that. I just have to mention Zvika Peak, a person that basically, again, revolutionized the Israeli music and brought disco music, disco groove. And people were dancing in the discotheques. This was a new kind of Israel that really did not exist before. But we are at the brink, at the brink of the 80s. And the 80s, it was a pretty hard decade. Not that there was any easy decade in the history of Israel. There was traumatic events almost in every decade. This one was definitely the Black Panthers and the Lebanon War, the first Lebanon War, and later on the Intifada. Let's see how those events are portrayed in music. Also, by the way, these are some of the movies. I haven't talked at all about movies because we are focusing on music, but here on the right is a movie that was made and released and became a huge hit. In my opinion, it's the best Israeli movie of all time. It's the movie about the Navy band, the Nachal band. And I played a clip from this movie earlier in my lecture, but I really highly recommend watching it. It will give you a lot of clue into what was the era like, and what was the function of these bands. And we have a couple of other movies here that talk about the division, the Mizrahi Ashkenazi division, and the stereotypes that came along with it. But back to music. So we have the first Lebanon War that happened in 1982, and quite a important song that was written in reaction to this war is this one. Let's play it a little bit and then I'll talk. Sorry about this. I have no other country. En li eretz acheret. Ehud Manor, again, we've seen him. He wrote the lyrics to Abani B, and a very influential writer. Wrote the lyrics in reaction to the happenings in Israel in the 80s, and the death of his brother in service as well. The interesting thing about this song is the fact that both the right wing and left wing groups, parties, have used this as their anthem throughout the years. So this song manages to be controversial or be relevant from the different side, the divide that started to grow and grow in the country of left and right in regards to their politics, of what's going on with Palestinians and other the wars with other Arab nations. The part of I have no other country, and a word in Hebrew being very nationalistic and connected to the land, and on the other hand, I will not be silent because my country has changed its face. So saying that there's a problem, and I need to remind you that there's something that we need to change. Very important song that represents the big political divide. Back in the 80s, it was the rise of the right wing of the Likud. In fact, they were tied for quite a long time, to the point that there was a unity government, sort of like what we were experiencing. I won't go into that, but there was a rotation, supposed to be a rotation between Begin and Peres. Begin resigned. It was a big problem, the political divide. Let's see. I think I will move on to yet another issue, the crisis of the banks. So the stock market crashed and the inflation went up, and people were really experiencing great despair. This song by Shalom Chanoch, the same guy that we saw before from Arik Einstein, back in over in the 80s, now he's singing rock songs, either about his own personal life and his issues, or about the protest songs politically charged. But we will see this is now definitely charged rock and roll. The first use of video clips. Probably not the first, but one of the first. This song is called Waiting for Mashiach. Mashiach is the Messiah, but it's also a common name.
יושבים שעות מחכים שמשיח יבוא, משיח איש מפתח ידו בכל ויד כל בו, ענן סמיך בירוחם ממצמץ בשפתיו, יהודה מסתכל בשעון ומפלבל בעיניו, משרד בצפון ארציאלי בעם יועץ, אחר הצהריים ובחוץ העולם מתרוצץ, נוחת סמסם אומר, תביא לנו קפה. משיח לא בא, משיח גם לא מטלפן, שתיקה כללית, 5 אנשים מתוחים, הדלת נפתחת וירדנה כולה חיוכים, השחור מיודע, התן לארציאל יבן, ירדנה יוצאת, עזרא לא מפסיק לעשן, הנה כי כן מתחלפת שעה בשעה.
Oops, sorry. This song basically illustrates what was going on in Israel at the time, high rates of suicides because of that financial despair that people were experiencing. And also the situation that Chanoch is so aptly describing, this office that people are stressed out. I don't know, but you probably know, if you've been to Israel, you notice that people smoke as if cancer was not the word of cancer didn't reach. And it's kind of like the black coffee and the tea, those are the classic, the people standing in the office smoking and drinking the black coffee, kafeh shachor, very, very Israeli. This song, a huge hit, huge success, so expressed the feelings of people at the time, so symbolic, taking something so fundamentally Jewish, this yearning for Mashiach, for the Messiah, and telling he's not coming, he's not even calling. Very poignant. On the other hand, we have a band called Tislam and a band called Benzin. Those bands were kind of competing. Both were bringing the word out of rock and roll music. And in Benzin was more identified with Mizrahim, and Tislam was more identified with Ashkenazim. The leader of Benzin is Yehuda Poliker, which we'll see in a bit, and the leader of Tislam is Yizdar Ashdod and Dani Bassan. Tislam also created a song which you'll see on your playlist about the political situation. So this was a huge, both the political situation with people not trusting the institution, with this kind of like nobody's able to reach any kind of conclusion or authority, and then the crisis in the stock market. So they're also kind of portraying this office, stressed office. The other thing that we see in the Song of Tislam is, again, this use of humor, and you will see it in the playlist. I have a clip with the lyrics in English as well. Let's move on from here. Benzin, by the way, just to say, this was probably the first band that kind of blue collar, I would say maybe Mizrahim identified more with this success. They achieved mainstream success. They identified more with the work and style of Yehuda Polike, who led Benzin. Later on, he developed a solo career, and we will see. Well, not here and not here. This one. He in his first solo album, he actually wrote this is a extremely influential and important in our culture. People started to talk about the Holocaust, which we haven't seen at all so much so far in music. In the 80s, the second generation is bringing everything up. And while we saw some talk about it in the discourse during the Eichmann trial, as far as music was involved, Yehuda Polike was probably one of the first ones with this highly influential album. Let's hear Ashes and Dust. He wrote this to his mother, a Holocaust survivor, as she was going back to visit her old town. You hear in the background Yehuda Polike, highly influenced by he's originally a Greek ethnicity, and he brought Greek music to the front line in Israeli music culture. Beautifully writing the lyrics to express the feelings.
אנשים שאיש לא מכיר, אין אפילו בית שיזכיר. ואם את נוסעת, לאן את נוסעת? הנצח הוא רק אפל ועבר. לאן את נוסעת? לאן את נוסעת? שנים וכלום עוד לא נמחק.
I cry every time I hear this song. I couldn't recommend more to check out this album by Yehuda Polike, Ashes and Dust. Beautiful, beautiful piece of work. This song is sung almost every Holocaust Memorial Day. It's very, very important. Oops, sorry. As well as the influence and kind of using the Greek bouzouki in the music and bringing that and talking to something that is considered sort of part of the Ashkenazi experience. So there was a melange of something completely all Israeli that people can relate to. And here we have another cultural hero, musical hero, Shlomo Artzi. Started as we saw him last lecture, dancing along in the Navy ensemble. He had shed that image of this all Israeli singing in the Navy band and became a rock star, writing songs about his life, about his family, about the political situation, about war. Actually, predominantly he was writing things personal stories, but in the 80s he as well released both a song about his experience as a second generation to Holocaust survivors and about the political situation and the financial crisis. Let's hear a little bit from this revolutionary album from Shlomo Artzi, Chom Yuli August. Now, if just the title is just, there's something so Israeli about it. I mean, people, when we talk, we say, we're going into the heat of Yuli, August, right? The Chom Yuli, August is the summer that we are just, and nobody is looking forward to. And the other thing that we can see here that's a complete shift from the kind of album covers that we saw back in the 60s. This is something very intimate, very personal. There's nothing idealistic or nationalistic about this. This is kind of a glimpse into Shlomo Arzi's life. In the image here on the right, I think I will play actually this one. This is him singing with his son, Ben Arzi, who later also became a singer. Let's hear Under Mediterranean Sky.
תחת שמי ים התיכון עושה ירח הפוגה ומתקפל דאגות אומר לי שהיא לכחול ומצייר אותך דומה או לא כן עכשיו יש את הזמן לשכב פרדן חצי עולם לוקח סם בגוף שלי צמרמורת שיר אוקסן צמרמורת יש לי מכיפור הפגם תחת שמי ים התיכון היה לך זמן להתאפר ולהפסיק יוצאת לרחוב בשמש של ביטחון חוזרת בזנח מקופה בין הרגליים חצי עולם בדוחק מתקיים חצי עולם שונא חצי בגוף שלי צמרמורת מתערב בלי אויב ובלי ידיד
Yes, so we see here in the lyrics this kind of going back and forth between talking about his personal life and kind of singing to his son. There is something very intimate and immediately kind of makes you feel at home. But he is reflecting back into the state of the world. And this is where we are at the end of the 80s. People have just had enough. They do not want to hear anything. They've too many problems, too many troubles. They just want to be at home and be not hear about all the issues. And Shlomo Arzi is I always compare him to sort of a Bruce Springsteen. He has a massive following and always people singing along with him in concerts. He's very successful till this day is considered kind of an all-Israeli icon. Let's kind of move on from here and see. Oops, here we go. Lastly, at the end of the 80s, we have the operations of Aliyah, another wave of Aliyah, which sort of ceased in the 70s. In the end of the 80s, there's an operation to bring the Jews of Ethiopia. Another difficult topic. The journey to come to Israel was an extremely hard and challenging one, and they were not received well and did not assimilate well in the Israeli society. Let's hear an absolutely chilling song that was composed by Shlomo Gronich, was written by Chaim Idisis, an Ethiopian immigrant or Ole, about the journey to come to Israel. The performance is by Shlomo Gronich and the Shva choir, Makelat Shva. That is a choir of Ethiopian immigrants. Let's hear a little bit. There's another one that I usually can't hear without crying.
Meet by
להרים רגליים, מאמץ אחרון לפני ירושלים.
Unfortunately, I have to move on. It's a very sad song, and it became a massive hit and a huge part of the Israeli culture. Yet another stone in our wall of experiences, talking about the trauma that the Jews of Ethiopia experienced coming to Israel. And later on, we will hear more about the issues of their assimilation. But let's not forget a very fundamental thing that happened in the culture, which is the rise of Mizrahi music really coming to the top of the charts and becoming a lot more noticed and talked about due to two major forces. One, Ofra Chaza, the incredible Ofra Chaza, and the other, Zohar Argov, another icon. Both of them saw huge success nationwide. Zohar Argov won the Festival of Songs. So this is not, he didn't just win the Mizrahi. I'm putting kind of quote marks. He won the Israeli Festival of Song, which brought him a lot of recognition. And this song is a massive hit. Haperach Begani. Let's hear a little bit of this. Beautiful. The words are by Avihu Medina. Okay, sorry about this again. What we can hear, we hear absolutely fantastic singing by Zohar Argov, and he has that grandiose opening. What maybe is not as apparent is that the lyrics in Hebrew are beautiful lyrics that Avihu Medina wrote, and he actually wrote them about his own experience in the kibbutz. So there is a excellent use of the Hebrew language in this, and the orchestration. This is a mixture of in our little musical pot that we have here. The orchestration is very grandiose, very Western use of instruments. And then we have that dancing beat. And I think the combination of all these elements, that is Israeli music. This is something that we couldn't have experienced so seamlessly. Maybe we saw little kind of sparks of that early with Bracha Tzefira and Nachum Nari, but this is the result of years of working together and really taking everything, the best of all worlds, and putting it together in a really beautiful piece of art. Here we have Ofra Chaza. I'm sure you're all familiar with she was an incredible singer. She was a huge hero to the Mizrahi culture because she had again represented Israel in the Eurovision. She saw international success. She was a huge star. So much so that she was chosen to sing in the Israeli celebration of the 50th celebration. And here she is singing Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, and a great, interesting choice, since this song is considered the pioneer, the chalutzi, the kind of like Ashkenazi, if you will, song, and she is giving it her interpretation. Let's see.
אוויר הרים צלול לקיים וריח אורנים נישא ברוח ארבעים עם כל פעמונים.
I'll have to stop here. I waited to play Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. I didn't play it when we were in the 60s, just so that we can hear this version of Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. So we are moving on. Whoops, sorry about this. For some reason it does that. I'll skip these songs, but here we have more songs talking about the experience of the Ma'abarot. We have Chava Alberstein with a song called Shar Aliyah, talking about her experience as a child in those transitional camps. So this is in the 80s, very much something that people talked about. And we have Ehud Banai talking about Black work and the problems of assimilation of the Ethiopian Jews. Later, troubles do not cease, and we have the Intifada. Intifada, the political divide is growing, really problematic, of course, traumatic years. And it went on for years and then restarted again. And we have 3 women, interestingly enough, writing about the situation, writing songs of protest or talking about this situation and experience and expressing frustration. We have Nurit Galron, we have Si Hayman, and we have here, sorry that the video doesn't show here, we have Chava Alberstein. And you can read a little bit in the lyrics. The Nurit Galron is talking about the dissonance between having on the one hand a vibrant culture in Tel Aviv, and on the other hand, Molotov bottles being thrown and stones, and this dissonance of people dancing in the discotheques that we saw before while all of this is going on. And Si Hayman is again writing about this kind of divide that we see, that people are soldiers against the Palestinians, and expressing a lot of protest about this situation. Of course, on the other hand, we have a lot of a rise of more with the likes of En Li Eretz Acheret, people using this kind of stating this is our right to defend ourselves. And the voices of the political divide between left and right are growing. And let me move on from here. All of these songs, just so that you see that the mainstream did not really accept this protest. This was not a consensus in the country. Both the Nurit Galron and Chava Alberstein the songs were banned from the radio, and then they were fighting to bring it back on. Moving on from here, we are at the brink. Whoops, I don't know why they all start like that. My time is almost up, but I do want to make it through to a bunch of other events in the 90s. This was my experience as a child, this funny looking photo here up on the right. We have the Oslo Agreement, we have Rabin's assassination. And in the songs, we continue to see this people completely being despaired from politics, from all the issues that are happening. This is Machina, the second most successful band after Kaveret. We see them here in the park. I will skip this one because we don't have time, but you can see that the lyrics are sort of talking about what's going on, all the problems in the country. Later on, they move on to the problems in the world. And the bottom line is, why do I need the politics, right? This was an idiom. This was what people say. Why you want to talk about politics? And here we have a little glimpse of their massive success. In the song, the audience is singing along with them. But I do want to move on this is all of these are incredible. This the humor, the use of humor. So we have TV shows that were basically our life saviors in during the Gulf War, which was a pretty miserable time, and they were incredibly funny TV shows. All of them, some of them are also that did songs that became kind of hits. There was a song about Saddam Hussein, and but I'm unfortunately I'll have to skip. And oops, they all started all at once. I have them in the playlist if you want to see. I just want to say about this clip that here in the bottom, I found it very funny in Corona era. This is a clip about how Israel was trying to deal with the education system at the time of the Gulf War. I have a lot of people asking me today about kind of Israel's how kind of fast they're dealing with the COVID and the dissemination of the vaccine and everything. So I think the reason is we just have a lot of experience. So here is what we see more and more in the 90s, that we have Aviv Geffen, the son of Yonatan Geffen, is becoming an icon of the 90s, the kids, the youth rebelling. This is a song with cursing in it. Couldn't be further away from the ideal of the Chalutz, saying this home that you're talking about, the Israel being home, the homeland, he's saying here in the lyrics, it's a dangerous place, it's a nasty place, right? A lot of frustration. Funnily enough, Aviv Geffen is the same guy who wrote the song that was forever connected to the death of Rabin, called Livkot Lecha. I will skip because there's other stuff I want to get to, but I apologize. This is all interesting things. Whoops, they all start, I guess. I do want to play a little bit of this. So this song is called Choref 73. Now we see here another army band, and I said that they've gone downhill, that they lost their glory. So don't get me wrong, the fact that you see an army band doesn't mean that they were ruling the charts, not at all. This song made a huge impact, but it was a kind of like a point being made that this is an army band singing the song "We Are the Children" of the Choref 73, which is the Yom Kippur War. Let's hear a little bit of the lyrics to show you what people were experiencing.
אנחנו הילדים של חורף, שנת 73. חלמתם אותנו לראשונה עם שחר, בתום הקרבות. הייתם דברים היפים שהודו למזלם הטוב. הייתן נשים צעירות מודאגות ורציתן כל כך לאהוב, וכשהייתן אותן באהבה בחורף 73 רציתן למלא בגופן עצמן שחיסון מלחמה.
Again, this is a song that is sung every Memorial Day for the memory of the memorial for a veteran, I would say, Memorial Day, or not veteran, but the victims of the people who lost their lives in wars. It expresses so much of this is a different kind of song. It's not so optimistic. It's a song of kids singing, we are still in this. You were telling us that there will be an end to all this war. You promised peace, and here we are, still in the army and taking weapons. So this was a huge song, very, very influential. Again, it wasn't received so well in the beginning. The the government said that it was kind of defeated, and they tried to ban it from being played. But over time, people really identified with it, and to this day, it's considered one of the most symbolic. And what a shift we have seen here from the re'ut, from the fraternity of the 50s, to the sadness of the children of 73. I'll really move on quickly, and I do apologize, but there is the Russian immigration. This is probably the last big wave of immigration that we have seen. And we have here a band that is potentially the most Israeli band. And this was the first time that you could really hear if a seamless mix of all the elements that we've seen throughout time. We have clever use of humor, talking about the Israeli in Hebrew, talking about the Israeli condition. In the music, in the style of this band, you will hear Moroccan music. You will hear the accordion, this kind of like sort of Russian style. You will see the electric guitar, and you will see a mandolina and the drum set. All of this does not stand out, does not stick out. It comes together in a really Israeli sound that you cannot hear anywhere else, almost as well, almost as much as we can hear it in the song of Zohar Argov, that can only have been made because of the Israel story. Let's hear a little bit. Very fun, very dancey, but talking about some the problems.
הנה אנשים מגולגלים בתוך נייר עיתון, וואו וואו וואו, חיים בתוך קופסה של שימורים אצלנו במטבח, ובמטבח על השולחן יש איש בתוך קנקן, וואו וואו וואו, מציץ מהזכוכית, ויום אחד נורא מתוך תותח, ובתותח יש אנשים שמקבלים סתירה, וואו וואו וואו, זקנים ותינוקות, ליד בקבוק שבור מחוף הים.
Very fun band. There are a lot more songs that I added to the playlist. Let's see just a little bit more we have here. I just want to mention briefly Sarit Hadad and Ethnics. Back in the 90s, also Sarit Hadad really pioneered. If Zohar Argov was the stepping stone, she really catapulted Mizrahi music. Today, the predominant style is Mizrahi pop. This is what you hear on the radio. These are the most successful songs. And Sarit Hadad played a huge part, and so did the band Ethnics. Ethnics also kind of mixed together a lot of Western influences and rock and roll. So I would say Ethnics along with T-Pex, the band we just saw, is really creating an Israeli sound that you cannot argue with or you cannot pick out the parts. Let's see. I do want to play for just to finish. Oh dear, they're all starting to play. I don't know why it does that. If you haven't heard this song, this is the last final step in this evolution of Israeli music, is where we have the rap. Rap arrived, but we are writing Israeli rap. So here's a band called Hadag Nachash with Shirat Hastikeh. This song was written by David Grossman. He took bumper stickers, put them all together into a poem. I think the video speaks for itself and the music. Again, instrumentation. We have the beat, but we have or Middle Eastern guitar playing.
שלם דורש שלום, מול צה"ל לנצח, עם חזק עושה שלום, מול תנו לצהל לכסח, אין שלום עם ערבים, אל תיתנו להם רובים, קרבי זה הכי, הכי, גיוס לכולם, תור לכולם, אין שום ייאוש בעולם, יש על זה כאן, אנחנו נאומן, no fear, משיח בעיר, אין ערבים, אין פיגועים, בגץ, מסכן ילדים, העם עם הגולן, העם עם הטרנספר, חבר אתה חסר, הקדוש ברוך הוא, אנחנו בוחרים, בך בחירה, ישירה, זה רק, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Unfortunately, I have to, my time is up. There's more music and a lot more to talk about, but I encourage you to check out the playlist once we send them all out. And you could see by this video that they are trying to show all the different faces of Israel, and those bumper stickers are all the issues packed into one song. I want to, let me get out of the share screen, and I will invite Shayna to give us a little blessing. I do want to say, just to on my behalf, I enjoyed greatly meeting you all somewhat on face-to-face, and I do hope you enjoyed it. And I will be here for questions, and I will read over the chat after Shayna has blessed us all. And please feel free to write me and give me any kind of feedback, and I would really love to hear from you. Shayna?
No,
All yours.
Not, well, it's not the rabbi quite yet.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank Noah for this wonderful series. It's really been very enjoyable and interesting, and I know everyone who attended enjoyed it. And Noah will come back to answer a few questions after this. And I want all of you to know that Ner Tamid's virtual doors are always open, and everyone is welcome. And I hope you will check out our website and come to a service or a program and see what we have to offer. But it's our custom at Ner Tamid to begin or end a program with a blessing. So it gives me a great deal of pleasure at this time to introduce our Rabbi Shayna Chandler Leon, who will offer a blessing. Rabbi?
Thank you, President Charlotte, and Toda Rabah LeNoah. Thank you so much to Noah for a thoughtful and thorough presentation. It is remarkable for such a young country that Israel has such a rich musical history. Certainly no surprise, but this has been an invitation to listen, to learn, to absorb, and to experience so much more. So we say, as we do at the heart of our Amidah prayer, Modim anachnu lach. We are grateful to you for sharing your expertise with us. The core of our tefillot, the core of our prayers, is the verse Shema Yisrael, listen Israel. And this has been an opportunity to do that, to listen to the beautiful music of Israel, to have a taste of such a rich banquet that we should hopefully come back for more. In this time of such extraordinary uncertainty and pain, we are blessed nonetheless to have this extraordinary technology for which we are also immensely grateful. We are grateful for the opportunity to be together in the ways that we can to create a virtual community of the Spirit and lay the groundwork for a time when, please God, we will be together again in person. And so for this evening, I want to call upon the Holy One of Blessing to send all of you the blessing of health, the blessing of strength, and the blessing of peace. Seitchem l'shalom, may we go from these screens back to our lives in peace, and may we meet again in times of sweetness and harmony and goodness. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Beautiful. I do want to say a few things. Some of you wrote to me, I'm in my day job, I'm actually a vocalist. I sing in times of COVID, it's been kind of challenging, but I invite you in case you're interested. I'm doing a Zoom along concert on Zoom with Achi Ben Shalom, which I'm sure some of you know very well. I will put the link here. It will be a Havdalah. We will do a little bit of a Havdalah and sing songs of Jewish American composers. So a completely different set of amazing songs. So I will put the link here at the chat, and I would love to see you all. Again, feel free to write to me. And I'm seeing here some questions about first, the band Pugi actually is the same as Kaveret. Mira, I saw that you wrote to me. Pugi is the same as Kaveret. The name of the album of Kaveret is Sipurei Pugi, The Tales of Pugi. Yes, interracial marriage. I think it was in the first lecture I had mentioned that Israel is the highest rate of interracial marriages, and that contributed a lot over time to all the bridging and mixtures between culture. The last band I played, Hadag Nachash and Tipex, the members they consider themselves as Israeli. They don't so much identify with their ethnic origin, whereas the previous generations very much identified themselves as that. So the identity of the Israeliness is really being formed by the later decades. And let's see, what am I missing? I might not be able to read everything fast. And again, if you have questions, feel free to write. And let's see. Yes, Ofra Chaza, amazing. I was of course sure to include her. You cannot skip over Ofra. And Anu Bana Arta, yes, it's a song from the Yishuv era. That was a song I would play in the first lecture. I don't know what was the context, Todd. Maybe you can write to me later. And yes, I think that's it. I'll just give myself one more gallery view to see everyone and say thank you so very much for being so patient and this is a lot to sit and listen to. I hope you enjoyed it, and I would really love to hear from you, because this is so silent here in the group. Here's my
Noah, there's a couple questions around availability of the recordings from these sessions.
Yes.
As well as the playlist and any other key links.
Anybody from Ner Tamid want to say when will the...
Yes, the playlist will be sent out to the whole mailing list probably next week. As soon as we get the one from tonight, everything will be mailed out. And if you need any, and we hope in time to be able to do these 4 lectures on private YouTube for those of you who had reservations to watch it again, each lecture. So we're hoping to get that together very soon, but the playlist will go out.
Yeah.
And thank you again, Noah.
My pleasure.
I know you put lots of effort and time into this, and it's greatly appreciated and very enjoyable.
It's absolutely my pleasure. It's the country that I love, and I'm very proud of the musical creations and the gems that came out of this country. And if people are asking, the Havdalah Jewish American Songbook concert is going to be next Saturday, not this, the next January 16th. And both Achi and I would love to see you. And here, will it be sent, the recording of the lecture, will it be sent to those who signed up and are not members?
Yes. Oh, yes. To everyone, we have the mailing list of every email address of people who made reservations, and it will be sent to everyone.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's wonderful to see all of you, and I wish you all a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Noah.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Noah. Thanks a lot.
Laila Tov.
Shalom Litov.